Part 2. He did begin walking again. Nothing like the marathons of '92, but he managed 2 miles a day if it wasn't raining. His usual route took him down the perversely named Mile Hill to the Derry Public Library and then on to Back Pages, a used bookstore and newsstand on the corner of Witcham and Main. Back Pages stood next to a jumbled junkatorium called Second-Hand Roast, Second-Hand Clothes, and he passed the store one day during the August of his discontent. Ralph saw a new poster among the announcements of outdated bean suppers and ancient church socials, placed so it covered roughly half of a yellowing Pat Buchanan for President placard. The woman in the two photographs at the top poster was a pretty blonde in her late 30s or early 40s, but the style of the photos, unsmiling full face on the left, unsmiling profile on the right, plain white background in both, was unsettling enough to stop Ralph in his tracks. The photos made the woman look as if she belonged in a post office wall or in a TV docudrama, and that the poster's printed matter made clear was no accident. The photos were what stopped him, but it was the woman's name that held him. Wanted for murder, Susan Edwina Day, was printed across the top in big black letters, and below the simulated mugshots in red, "Stay out of our city." There was a small line of print at the very bottom of the poster. Ralph's clothes had deteriorated quite a bit since Carolyn's death. Gone to hell in a handbasket might actually have been a more accurate way of saying it. And he had to lean forward until his brow was pressed against the dirty show window of Second-Hand Roast, Second-Hand Clothes before he could decipher it, paid for by the Main Life Watch Committee. Far down in his mind, a voice whispered, Hey, Susan Day, how many kids did you kill today?" Susan Day, Ralph recalled, was a political activist from either New York or Washington, the sort of fast-speaking woman who regularly drove taxi drivers, barbers, and hard-hat construction workers in the foaming frenzies. Why that particular little jangle of doggerel had come into his mind, however, he couldn't say. It was tagged to some memory that wouldn't quite come. Maybe his tired old brains were just cross-referencing that '60s Vietnam protest chant, the one which had gone, Hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? No, that's not it, he thought. Close, but no cigar. It was just before his mind could cough up Ed Deepno's name and face. A voice spoke from almost beside him. Earth Ralph! Come in, Ralphie, baby! Roused out of his thoughts, Ralph turned toward the voice. He was both shocked and amused to find he had almost been asleep on his feet. Christ, he thought. You never know how important sleep is until you miss a little. Then all the floors start to tilt, and all the corners on things start to round off. It was Hamilton Davenport, the proprietor of Backpage, who had spoken to him. He was stalking the library card he kept in front of his shop with brightly jacketed paperbacks. His old corncob pipe, to Ralph it always looked like the stack of a model steamship, jutted from the corner of his mouth, sending little puffs of blue smoke into the hot, bright air. Winston Smith, his old gray tomcat, sat in the open doorway of the shop with his tail curled around his paws. He looked at Ralph with yellow-eyed indifference, as if to say, You think you know old, my friend? I'm here to testify you don't know dick about getting old. Sheesh, Ralph, Davenport said. I must have called your name at least 3 times. I guess it was wool gathering, Ralph said. He stepped past the library cart, leaned in the doorway. Winston Smith held his place with regal disinterest, and grabbed the 2 papers he bought every day, a Boston Globe and a USA Today. The Daily News came right to the house courtesy of Pete the paperboy. Ralph sometimes told people that he was sure one of the 3 papers was comic relief, but he had never been able to make up his mind which one it was. I haven't... As he broke off as Ed Deepno's face came into his mind, it was that he heard that nasty little chant from last summer out by the airport, and it really wasn't any wonder it had taken him a little while to retrieve the memory. Ed Deepno was the last person in the world from whom you'd expect to hear something like that. Ralphie? Ham said. You just shut down on me. Ralph blinked. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't been sleeping very well. That's what I was starting to say. Bummer. But there are worse problems. Just drink a glass of warm milk and listen to some quiet music half an hour before bed. Ralph had begun to discover this summer that everyone in America apparently had a pet remedy for insomnia, some bit of bedtime magic that had been handed down through the generations like the family Bible. Bach's good, also Beethoven, and William Ackerman ain't bad, but the real trick, Davenport raised one finger impressively to emphasize this, is not to get up from your chair during that half hour, not for anything. Don't answer the phone, don't wind up the dog, put out the alarm clock, don't decide to brush your teeth, nothing. Then, when you do go to bed, bam, out like a light. What if you're sitting in there in your favorite easy chair and all at once you realize you have a call of nature? Ralph asked, These things can come on pretty suddenly when you get to be my age. doing in your pants?" Davenport said promptly and burst out laughing. Ralph smiled but had a dutiful feel, as Insomnia was rapidly losing whatever marginal humor it once might have had. "In your pants!" Ham chortled. He slapped the library card and wagged his head back and forth. Ralph happened to glance down at the cat. Winston Smith looked blandly back at him, and to Ralph his calm yellow gaze seemed to say, "Yeah, that's right, he's a fool, but he's my fool." "Not bad, huh?" Hamilton Davenport mastered the snappy comeback. He snorted laughter, shook his head, and then took the $2 bills Ralph was holding out and slipped them into the pocket of his short red apron and came out with some change. "That about right?" "You bet. Thanks, Ham." "Uh-huh. And all joking aside, try the music. It really works. Mellows out your brainwaves or something." "I will." And the devil of it was he probably would, as he had already tried Mrs. Rappinport's lemon and hot water recipe and Sean McClure's advice on how to clear his mind by slowing his respiration and concentrating on the word cool. Except when Shauna said it, the word came out cool. When you're trying to deal with a slow but relentless rhythm of your good sleep time, any folk remedy started to look good. Ralph began to turn away and then turn back. "What's with that poster next door?" Ham Davenport wrinkled his nose. "Damn Dalton's place? I don't look in there at all if I can help. It screws up my appetite. Has he got something new and disgusting in the window? I guess it's new. It's not as yellow as the rest of them, and there's a notable lack of fly-through on it. Looks like a wanted poster, only it's Susan Day in the photos." "Susan Dan, son of a bitch!" He cast a dark, humorless look at the shop next door. "What is she, president of the National Organization of Women or something?" "Ex-president and co-founder of Sisters in Arms. Author of My Mother's Shadow and Lilies of the Valley. That one's a study of battered women and why so many of them refuse to blow the whistle on the men that batter them. She won a Pulitzer Prize for it. Susie D is one of the 3 or 4 most politically influential women in America right now, and she can really write as well as think. That clown knows I've got one of her petitions sitting right by my cash register." "What petitions?" "Trying to get her up here to speak," Davenport said. "You know the Right to Life was tried to firebomb Woman Care last Christmas, right?" Ralph cast his mind cautiously into the black pit he'd been living in at the end of '92 and said, "Well, I remember the cops caught some guy in the hospital's long-term parking lot with a can of gasoline, but I didn't know that was Charlie Pickering. He's a member of Daily Bread, one of the Right to Life groups to keep the pickets marching out there," Davenport said. "They put him up to it, too, take my word. This year they're not bothering with gasoline, though. They're going to try to get the city council to change the zoning regulations and squeeze Woman Care right out of existence. They might just do it, too. You know Derry, Ralph. It's not exactly a hotbed of liberalism." "No," Ralph said with a wan smile. "It's never been that. And Woman Care is an abortion clinic, isn't it?" Davenport gave him an out-of-patience look and jerked his head in the direction of second-hand rows. "That's what assholes like him call it," he said, "only they like to use the word mill instead of clinic. They ignore all the other stuff Woman Care does." To Ralph, Davenport had begun to sound a little like the TV announcer who had hawked run-free pantyhose during the Sunday afternoon movie. They're involved in family counseling, they deal with spouse and child abuse, and they run a shelter for abused women over by the Newport Town Line. They have a 24 they have a rape crisis center in the town building by the hospital and a 24-hour hotline for women who've been raped or beaten. In short, they stand for all the things that make Baltimore men like Dalton shit bullets, but they do perform abortions. That's what the pickets are about, right? There had been sign-carrying demonstrations in front of the low-slung, unobtrusive brick building that housed Woman Care for years, it seemed to Ralph. They always looked too pale to him, too intense, too skinny, or too fat, too utterly sure that God was on their side. The signs they carried said things like, "The unborn have rights to, and life, what a beautiful choice," and they'd all stand by "abortion is murder." On several occasions, women using the clinic, which was near Derry home but not actually associated with it, Ralph thought, had been spat upon. "Yeah, they perform abortions," Sam said. "You got a problem with that?" Ralph thought of all the years he and Carolyn tried to have a baby, years that had produced nothing but false alarms, several false alarms, and a single messy 5-month miscarriage, and shrugged. Some of the days seemed too hot and his legs too tired. The thought of his return journey, the Mile Hill leg of it in particular, hung in the back of his mind like something strung from a line of fishhooks. "Christ, I don't know," he said. "I just wish people didn't have to get so shrill." Davenport grunted, walked over to his neighbor's display window, and peered at the bogus wand poster. While he was looking at it, a tall, pallid man with a goatee, the absolute antithesis of the Marlboro Man, Ralph would have said, materialized in the gloomy depths of second-hand rest, second-hand clothes like a vaudeville spook that has gotten a bit moldy around the edges. He saw what Davenport was looking at, and a tiny, disdainful smile dimpled the corners of his mouth. Ralph thought it was the kind of smile that could cost a man a couple of teeth or a broken nose, especially on a dog-hot day like this one. Davenport pointed to the poster and shook his head violently. Dalton smiled deep and he clapped his hands at Davenport. Who gives a shit what you think, the jester said, and then disappeared back into the depths of his store. Davenport returned to Ralph, bright spots of color burning in his cheeks. That man should be next to the word prick in the dictionary, he said. Exactly what he thinks about you, I imagine, Ralph thought, but of course didn't say. Davenport stood in front of the library cart full of paperbacks, hands stuffed into his pockets beneath his red change apron, brooding at the poster of Hey, Hey, Susan Day. Well, Ralph said, I suppose I better. Ralph Davenport shook himself out of his brown study. Don't go yet, he said. Sign my petition first, will you? Put a little shiny back on my morning. Ralph shifted his feet uncomfortably. I usually don't get involved in confrontational stuff. Come on, Ralph, Davenport said in a let's be reasonable voice. We're not talking confrontation here. We're talking about making sure that the fruits and nuts, like the ones from our daily bread, and political Neanderthals like Dalton, don't shut down a really useful women's resource center. It's not like I'm asking you to endorse testing chemical warfare and weapons on dolphins. No, Ralph said, I suppose not. Hoping to send 5,000 signatures to Susan Day by the 1st of September probably won't do any good. Derry's really not much more than a white place in the road. And she's probably booked into the next century anyhow, but it can't hurt to try. Ralph thought about telling him that the only petition he wanted to sign was one asking the gods of sleep to give him back the 3 hours or so of good rest that they had stolen away. But then he took another look at the man's face and decided against it. Carolyn would have signed his damn petition, he thought. She was no fan of abortion, but she was also no fan of men coming home after the bars closed and mistaking their wives and kids for soccer balls. True enough, but that wouldn't have been her main reason for signing. She would have done it on the off chance that she might get to hear an authentic firebrand like Susan Day up close and in person. She would have done it out of the ingrained curiosity which had perhaps been her dominating characteristic. Something so strong that even the brain tumor had been able to kill it. 2 days before she died, she had pulled the movie ticket he'd been using as a bookmark out of the paperback novel he'd left on her bedside table, because she wanted to know what he'd been to see. It had been A Few Good Men, as a matter of fact, and he was both surprised and dismayed to discover how much it hurt to remember that. Even now it hurt like hell. Sure, he told him. I'll be happy to sign it. My man! Davenport exclaimed and clapped him on the shoulder. The broody look was replaced by a grin, but Ralph didn't think the change much of an improvement. The grin was hard and not especially charming. Step into my den of iniquity. Ralph followed him into the tobacco-smelling shop, which did not seem particularly iniquitous at 9:30 in the morning. Winston Smith fled before them, pausing just once to look back at his ancient yellow eyes. He's a fool and you're another, that parting stare might have said. Under the circumstances, it wasn't a conclusion Ralph felt much inclined to dispute. He tucked his newspapers under his arm, leaned over the rule sheet on the counter beside the cash register, and signed the petition asking Susan Day to come to Derry and speak in defense of woman care.